Hi, good morning. My name is Dave Teixeira, and I'm in a kind of a unique position here to bring some different perspective, or a unique perspective perhaps, to the debate today on MMA. I'm a pro wrestling promoter. In fact, I use the services of the Vancouver Athletic Commission more than any other of the promotions combined in the city of Vancouver. In fact, over the last year, I've attended just about every Vancouver Athletic Commission meeting, so I've been there for all the debates on MMA and also on the fine sport of professional wrestling. And I also own a consulting company, Dave.ca Communications, where we do political consulting. We also consult with nonprofit organizations such as the Wear Pink Anti-Bullying Day, Terry Fox Foundation, a number of anti-drug organizations, and homelessness committees. So I come to you as a unique specimen, I suppose, to speak in favor of the proposal that's before you today to regulate MMA here in the city of Vancouver. I'd like to be able to address the 7 points that are in the document, as well as to comment on the two main points of contention from the March meeting, which had to do with the economic impacts and also on participant safety. So the first part of this is there's been, and unfortunately Councillor Woodward is not here to hear this, unfortunately, but there was comments on, why is the province not helping or not regulating this? Well, quite frankly, they are. Under the community charter, under section 143, as you know, you already are given the ability to regulate combat sports. And this is something that I thought the city would embrace. There's so much talk of downloading of services onto the city and so much taking away of tax revenue. This is a gift. The economic impact, which we'll get to in a little bit, is something that you will certainly want to look to. So the community charter, again, allows you to regulate this sport. The only thing I would suggest that should be added to it is that the community charter should specifically spell out the rules of engagement for the sport and allow you as the city to regulate the taxation piece of this and also just how you license it. So that way, addressing Councillor Woodward's concern earlier on, what are the rules? Well, if we use the Nevada state rules that are common within the MMA industry and have that right in the community charter, and then allow you as the municipalities to continue to regulate under 143, but then you guys collect the tax revenue from such events. In terms of participant safety, again, after attending the Vancouver Athletic Commission meetings, this is certainly paramount to the folks on the committee and also just about to every person who's come to present to the committee. The unified rules allows for fighter safety, clearly allows. The rules have evolved over the years. This is a sport which is somewhat new to North America. And put in perspective, this is pretty much the first new sport of our generation. This sport has been around for years and years and years, but really in North America, it's been around since 1993 with UFC #1 on November 13th. Just a real trivia nut, and I love dates. But that was an event that we now see well over 100 events that have successfully taken place. And as we heard earlier from the folks from UFC, there's not been any claims against their insurance for that. Interesting enough, the injury stats on page 6 of the report compare boxing and MMA. The University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, I'm sorry, I have to read this part off my notes, did a similar report comparing soccer, basketball, baseball, softball, wrestling, cheerleading, and football. Which of those had the highest rates of concussion? Cheerleading. And don't get me wrong, I love cheerleaders. However, and I can see by the gleam in your eyes, sir, you too, but that's awesome. But that said, this isn't a shot against cheerleading or any of the other sports, but rather to take this all in perspective. To say that MMA has a higher concussion rate or is more dangerous is simply not true. There have been more deaths in badminton than in MMA. In fact, the death in badminton occurred here in this city in 2005. There's more deaths this year in golf and cheerleading than in the entire history of MMA. An April 2008 report from the Boston University School of Medicine described cheerleading as the most dangerous sport in which high school and college-age women participate. Between 1982 and 2007, more than half the serious injuries and deaths among athletes were related to cheerleading. The rules of MMA mitigate these injuries. The economic impact. On page 8 of the report, there's an interesting statement in there, and I'm cognizant of the time, so I'm kind of flying through this. The incremental spending in Metro Vancouver would be around $1.5 million for a UFC event. I think that's a very conservative figure. In fact, the Vancouver Sun yesterday said, quote, officials in Montreal have pegged the economic impact of a UFC event around $20 million in increased tourism, production, commission fees, and associated revenue. So I think it's the wording in this report. If you're looking for economic impact, you're looking at around $20 million. If you're looking for safety of the participants, it's there. You've heard from the main MMA promotion, UFC. You have heard and probably will hear from other smaller promotions that will talk about the safety that they put in there. And as a professional wrestling promoter for the last 13 years, I can tell you we want our sports to go ahead in the City of Vancouver, and we encourage you and implore you to pass this today. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Zhang has some questions for you.
Thank you very much. No, it's not going to go cheerleaders. Actually, I was going to... Oh, you're making me lose my train of thought. So what I found very interesting is the fact that you do promote both wrestling and what was the other one? You do wrestling.
I promote professional wrestling.
Okay, and we had the previous speaker, Mr. Poslan, complaining about or suggesting that the problem with MMA was that it was going to sensationalize violence, but yet wrestling, when I watch it on TV, and certainly I went to a lot of wrestling matches as a kid at the Gardens with my uncles, it's the same kind of thing. Can you explain to me why do you think, from your perspective, when we see so much wrestling on TV, whether it be WWF and all that, and they are talking about The Undertaker and we're going to kill this guy, rip his arms off, all that kind of stuff, we don't see that type of copycat kind of behavior in adults as people that perhaps, as Mr. Poslan was suggesting, may happen with MMA. Well, why? I mean, they're both very sensationalized, but why don't we see this happening in wrestling as we do in other things?
Well, I'm in a unique position, again, being a fan of MMA all my, no, not all my life, I'm not just 15, but I mean for the whole life of the sport here in North America, but been a lifelong wrestling fan. I'm also in politics. And I tell people there's more violence in politics and more politics in wrestling. Basically, it's whatever the people watching will breed the contempt for the sport or for the entertainment. Some people will mimic what they see on television. There's no way to get around that. Back in the 50s and so on with Superman, you had people jumping off of roofs and diving off of different things to mimic Superman. That's going to happen. To blame it just on the sport is not fair. And I can tell you from the promoters that I've worked with, both in the pro wrestling and in the MMA worlds, it's against our business sense to do anything that will hurt our fan base. We want to move forward, and we want to work hand in hand with the Vancouver Athletic Commission. I'm speaking from the pro wrestling side, and I can only assume that would be on the mixed martial arts side. And seeing UFC here today and seeing other promotions here today and knowing that what I've done in the past, both for MMA and pro wrestling, it's an opportunity for us to move forward. Will people mimic what they see on television and have some negative results? Absolutely. Absolutely. And I know this comes as a shock, there's some bad politicians out there. I can name about 50 of them, but I'll only name one, Scott Young out in Port Coquitlam. Thankfully, he's gone now. And that's what will need to happen. You have to weed out the bad, and I can only implore you to allow this to happen under the 2-year agreement that you have, or the 2-year test. I think that's a very fair and a very safe thing for you folks to do. Take a look at this, and at the end of 2 years, reevaluate.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Zhang. Councillor Meigs?
I'll be very brief, Mr. Teixeira, but is pro wrestling on the decline or on the upswing?
Actually, according to the Ipsos Reid poll that came out in July, and I know someone asked about polling data, and I apologize, I didn't bring everything, but I believe it's on my website, Dave.ca, that Ipsos Reid poll is there, and it's from July, and pro wrestling is on the decline. In fact, this is a trend that I've seen in my industry for about 4 years now. So pro wrestling, I believe, is on the decline by 20%. I know my sort of friends from UFC can probably speak to that more. But pro wrestling is on the decline. The pay-per-view buys of UFC are through the roof. And I can tell you some other polling data is Vancouver has one of the highest per capita pay-per-view buys for UFC. So to say that it's not popular or to use a generic poll from North Vancouver as an indicator is just not good science.
But don't you think, since you watch it so closely, my perception is that UFC is a combination of modern mass marketing techniques with a clear identification of audience. It's a business proposition, and it would make sense to me that it would eat pro wrestling's lunch, because the view of pro wrestling was that it was fake, and there's no doubt that UFC is real.
It is eating pro wrestling's lunch right now, and I'd also say that the UFC president Dana White has learned very handily at the feet of Vince McMahon from the WWE. So I think that UFC has learned some of the promotional skills and which pitfalls to avoid, and they're doing a phenomenal job. And it is exploding because it is real. It's different. than pro wrestling. There's some fan crossover, absolutely, but right now UFC is just taken off.
Well, I'll stop here, but it's a cautionary tale, I think, too. Don't you think that pro wrestling has seen so many tragic episodes recently, including the Calgary wrestlers, one of whom died in an accident sliding down a wire, and another one who may have killed his family on a steroids binge. I mean, again,
I can only compare it to every other industry. If you want to do comparative analysis in politics, there's plenty of bad apples out there, and they breach the public trust all the time. There's injuries that will continue to happen in combat sports. There's injuries that will happen in cheerleading. Again, cheerleading, the #1 sport for death in North America.
No, I can't take that at all seriously, so I'm not even going to go there. But, I think
if you go to Dave.ca,
I mean, you were doing great.
That data.
What was that website name again?
It's Dave.ca.
No further questions.
All right, thank you, Councillor Meggs. Thank you for coming today.
Great, thank you.
Our next speaker is Jennifer Vaughn.